When and how much post-exercise protein should you have, whether you're in perimenopause or you are in postmenopause? I'm going to answer that question today. Post-exercise protein is a topic I revisit regularly. It's Nutrition Month as I release this episode, and I'm talking about strength training a lot this month because Stronger is open for enrollment. More on that in a bit. In this episode, I'm talking all about the ways to optimize your pre and your post exercise protein meal. Specifically, I'm talking to you, midlife babe. I'll also reveal a few things that may be going wrong if you're not seeing results. Things that might surprise you, and yet not really, but remind you that you need to be conscious of them as well. I'm Deborah Atkinson. You're listening to Flipping 50, where I address your top struggles, concerns, and hopefully, as much as visiting the doom and gloom, we inspire you to know that you can age optimally with the energy and the vitality that you want, need, and deserve. I share what to eat, how to move, and how to change your mindset often about both of those things so that you can have the future, the 10, the 20, the 30, or more years that you want, living with a healthy health span, not just a lifespan. These are your next 50 and your better half. So I mentioned just a bit ago, Stronger is open. Specifically, the program is Stronger, Tone, and Define. So listen, if years ago you did, even last year, a basic training with me, Stronger 1 is called Basic Training. This is only the second time we've offered Stronger, Tone, and Define to the public. The first time was January. That group is just wrapping up. They're getting close to their workout in week 10, 11, and 12, depending on how quickly they got on the bandwagon. And they've had such phenomenal results and are so excited about what do we do next. Can't wait, which is exactly what I want. I have to be honest. I really want you to become codependent. I want you to start strength training with me and continue, whether with me or alone. You keep going. Look, in 6 months, you can reverse the negative effects of 179 genes associated with aging. That's a pretty good return on investment of time and energy that really doesn't take any money. You can do it in your pajamas with weights at home once you know what to do. And it gives you side effects, positive side effects, a little bit more tone, maybe the confidence to wear some clothes that you haven't worn for a while. And let's face it, we're going to get out of this. We're going to get out of those yoga pants if, in fact, you want to. So, Stronger starts April 1st. Your very last chance to get in, if you're listening to this live, is March 31st, 2021. If you're listening later, don't go away because we launch a few times a year regularly. If you go to the link I'll provide you with, you can get on the notifications list and be the first to know. This has been released and there is an early bird rate. I love fast action takers who are waiting and ready and want some answers that are designed for women in menopause based on research featuring women in menopause. You're not a mouse, you're not a man, and you're not a young woman. Your hormones, protein, or I'm sorry, your hormones, your metabolism, I have protein on the brain today, can you tell? And your body composition are very different than either of those. So exercise that works for them is not necessarily going to result in the same transformation for you. So although there's a very limited amount of research featuring women in midlife, it's getting better, by the way. It is 100% of what I use. So I'm not designing a new strength training program based on creativity or what I like to do for my workout or the mood I'm in. It's about protocols that I've researched and studied and that have been effective for women to change body composition by increasing lean muscle tissue, resulting in more metabolism to decrease body fat and to increase and enhance bone density, while at the same time taking care of your joints, your ligaments, your connective tissue that needs a little bit more recovery than it did 10 and 20 years ago. So if you've got a little arthritis, a little osteoarthritis, because you've had a really great life and some fun along the way, listen, I've got you covered. I've got ankles and knees and hips and shoulders and elbows that are also about to be 57. I know, I get you. We want to be active. We want all the perks. We don't want any injury. Got it. All right. I'm going to leave the link to Stronger in the show notes. And we are going to dive into this episode. So, in recent prior master classes, by the way, we do a monthly master class. And if you're in our community getting the emails, you get notified for those. But in a recent prior master class and in podcasts, I've addressed these questions. How much muscle protein synthesis? How much does it decline with age? Let me define that. Muscle protein synthesis is maybe a mouthful. I say it so often, I may take for granted you know what it is, but it is the ability to use protein that you eat for the benefit of your muscle, your overall lean muscle mass, including your skeleton muscle. So when you're thinking, why can't I tone my arms up? And hopefully you're thinking other things as well. But muscle protein synthesis declining may mean you're not getting all the protein to the muscle that it needs. So that's one question. I also look at what's the rate of muscle loss during menopause, not just as we age. Men and women both are losing. We lose a little bit faster because we have less to begin with. But during menopause, what's the rate? I've talked about how it's accelerated. How disabling is muscle loss for women over 50? What are we looking for? And recently, I've thrown into that mix what effect has the pandemic had on our muscle losses? And what can we do about it to get it back? In this post, I'm revisiting the topic, and I do so because of the conversations that are occurring in our community, the Flipping 50 community, that indicate even trainers and coaches are not clear on the differences for women over 50, and that makes for an extremely confusing environment for you. Confused minds don't do anything, or at least won't change anything they're doing, even if it's not working. So let's give you some clarity. I want to talk about how to optimize a post-exercise increase in muscle protein synthesis so that you can enhance your muscle size and strength with resistance training. Now, I'm going to pause right there because some of you may have just, wait a second, you're distracted because of something I said. And that thing is enhance muscle size. So inevitably, most women think, I don't want to gain, right? The word gain, even if it's followed by lean muscle, for a lot of women still instills a little panic. Like, I don't want to get bulky. Trust me, girl, you don't have the hormone profile to get bulky unless you are taking steroids on the sly. Somebody's slipping you a really high dose of testosterone, and I know that's probably not likely. So, if you're finding you do get bulky, chances are you're potentially eating a little bit differently. And I don't mean more, because I'm going to talk about that later too, and how you're potentially eating too little. But you may not be exercising according to your body type. So if you happen to be on Instagram, you can go and look at my timeline, and you'll find me at Flipping 50 TV. And recently I shared, how do you exercise for your body type when it comes to resistance training? And that may be helpful for you. So let's look at this muscle protein synthesis. It's the primary variable influencing your muscle net balance, meaning what's happening to your muscle? Is it breaking down or are you building it up? With a dietary amino acid ingestion, that means eating protein, representing the single most important nutritional variable that will enhance your post exercise rate of muscle protein synthesis. So if we know that, that comes directly from a study. Can you tell? It's a little wordy. But it makes what we need to do, the steps we need to take, much more obvious. We need to figure out, okay, what is the best dietary amino acid ingestion? What protein foods and when will help us get the best post exercise muscle protein synthesis so you can be lean and strong and have more endurance and stamina. So, quote unquote, this is directly from one of the studies, and there are about 7 that I will put in references for this episode. Consideration must also be made for the age of resistance trained individuals, as older adults require more protein over and above that of their younger counterparts to receive the same benefits noted above, quote unquote. That was from a study. So, very important that if you're getting advice from trainers and for coaches, health coaches, that they're not just giving you the generic, here's a sports nutrition quote, but they've dug into the research and know this was based on studies done on women over 50, just like you and me. Important pieces. All right, so let's cut to the chase. And really, what I'm going to do here is break down some vocabulary because there are things that we have to consider. Number one, high quality. So, what you eat. So, we could have protein, but we could look at all right, I could have a boiled egg. I could have a whey protein shake. I could have a piece of steak. I could have salmon. So, what is the difference? Which ones of those are best? What is important is that it's high quality. So, it's got complete essential amino acid profile. There are essential amino acids, there are 20, but we need to get 9 of them in our diet every day. So, essential amino acids, there are 9 amino acids, and I may have misstated that, so I want to be clear. There are 20. So, you also want a high quality protein source as designated by its high, especially in leucine, which is an amino acid that's been tied to greater muscle protein synthesis. So, if you're say having some kind of a complete protein, but it's low in leucine, that threshold that you need may not be present. So it's kind of like shooting blanks. Not quite. So you have to know that all complete proteins are not created equal. So among the essential amino acids, each source has more or less of any one of the essential amino acids. Okay. Second thing, it's got to be high quality. Second thing is it needs to be really rapidly absorbed so that when you're at this time after exercise, when your muscles are really ripe for paying back that breakdown that's happened, from preventing that to happen, decreasing the inflammation, and enhancing the results of your exercise, it ideally is rapidly absorbed. So think liquid versus solid. That could be an argument for a smoothie or smoothie bowl if you're a girl like me. Some proteins like whey protein are very easily digestible. However, talking to you and to me, for women in midlife, it is a dairy source, has other complications for women in midlife. often dairy, period, but specifically whey protein because it is rapidly absorbed can cause bloating, inflammation, sugar spikes because it's rapidly absorbed, all things that actually detour from the results that you want. And if it's causing blood sugar spikes, it's causing then a, a following insulin spike, which means your body is storing fat. It can't burn it. Next up is aging. So, aging is definitely a factor. Older adults do not have the same level of muscle protein synthesis that younger adults do. Therefore, they require a higher dose, you and I, that is more protein per meal or post workout to have the same effect compared to younger adults. So, if you are thinking, I just don't get the same results as I did earlier or younger, and you're trying to eat the same way you did when you were younger, there you have it, friend. The puzzle is solved. You have to eat more protein. Okay, now when I'm talking about protein all through this episode, I also don't want to ignore this. As you eat more protein, if you eat more animal protein, you also want to be careful that you're inclusive of more fruits and vegetables. So I'm going to emphasize the vegetables in order to keep your alkalinity, your body's internal environment, and pH optimal. So that too supports muscle. It also supports lean body tissue, fat burning for all those reasons. And your face and skin will thank you for that as well. So, midlife is specifically at menopause, the accelerated rate of muscle loss makes it even more important to increase your protein. So if you're sitting at the table or standing at the kitchen island with your partner, maybe a male partner or maybe a son, and you're making a smoothie and there's a little bit left over, you should have it. Don't give it up, girlfriend. Females with less muscle mass to begin with and with a decline in estrogen at midlife, increase in cortisol, and a decrease in both growth hormone and testosterone, you will find it more paramount to watch your protein intake and be sure it's adequate. Next up, I just want to touch on this endurance exercise. So, fewer studies on older adults and endurance exercise effects on protein exist, namely because it's not the primary recommendation for older adults. You don't ever hear me talk about building yourself up so you can go for a 5-mile run, or a 10-mile run, or do a marathon or half marathon, because that's not really hormone balancing. It's not really preserving or helping you age backwards. And because of significant more oxidation, really requires careful planning to be sure that you're not accelerating your aging with lots of endurance exercise. And by the way, no judgment. I say this as someone who loves endurance exercise. In fact, genetically is predisposed to having my fitness level accelerated by a greater percentage of my exercise being endurance training. But that said, you and I cannot escape the need for HIIT and the need for resistance training, especially if we're struggling with body composition. So there is a greater oxidation and muscle wasting that occurs with endurance exercise, and in older adults is more prominent. And protein needs do rise with endurance activity, but that's really only been tested on younger adults. So we can just extrapolate that that would be true for us. Last but not least, chronic negative energy balance. If you're dieting, you're cutting calories on purpose, or by accident, say you're fasting and you have a window of eating that is so short, you're unable to eat adequate protein because you're just too full. You can't do it. Over time, that will have a negative effect on your muscle. There is a benefit to fasting. No argument there. However, during fasting, muscle can't be gained. It may be maintained, There is a protective factor that occurs with fasting to prevent muscle losses, but that does not mean that you'll be able to gain lean muscle. And gaining lean muscle is one of the only roads to an elevated or higher metabolism. So you really need, if you're fasting, to be sure that you value the times when you're not fasting. And the increased protein intake following the fast is actually what triggers muscle protein synthesis. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about timing and what happens if you're taking in suboptimal amino acid compositions, purely plant based sources. So it means that, if we were to compare uh, beans and rice, for instance, at a meal, and that were your protein source, to a steak, and listen, I'm not a steak lover either, but or tacos, all right, made with beef or made with ground bison, the amino acid profile of the bison, the beef, or the steak is much higher than, and you're done, right? So it's kind of like, there we go, done, I'm taken care of, that protein's great. With a plant based protein, the profile of all those essential amino acids, even if we look at gram for gram, 30 grams of protein, 30 grams of protein, the essential amino acid profile is not the same. So it is lower, and you won't have as much of certain ones, those branched chain amino acids that you really need. And that is leucine, valine, and isoleucine. So be thinking about that. And I've got to talk about catabolism versus anabolism. We often think bodybuilding, resistance training, strength training, this is going to build my muscles up. But truly, exercise breaks your muscle down. That's what you're doing. They're in that 10 minutes, 20, 45-minute session where in your strength training, breaking muscle down, micro tears are occurring. And unless you recover, and what's involved in recovery? Rest, like days and hours between your next workout. Sleep, which is king, queen, and prince and princess of rest, right? And then eating adequate calories overall. I'm going to talk about that again, and adequate protein as well. All of those things have to be considered. And without the adequate stimulus of the exercise, the protocol that you're using has to be quality. And the other things that I just mentioned, there is going to be more catabolism. Kind of sounds like cannibalism, and that you can infer. So it's breaking down, breaking down, breaking down. And you have less estrogen in your body now. That has a muscle protecting factor. And when estrogen goes down, cortisol tends to go up. And I mentioned this earlier. Cortisol breaks muscle down. So if you're stressing yourself out, you're drinking coffee all the time, thinking, well, if I'm drinking coffee, I'm not eating, and fewer calories must be good. Absolutely not, sister. You're actually doing more harm to your muscle than good to your muscle. So timing. We're going to get a little bit more into timing. And I should give you the follow up. So, the opposite of catabolism, the breaking down of muscle, is the building up of muscle. And that is called anabolism. What we're looking for is, how do we create an anabolic environment where there's adequate protein, there's adequate essential amino acids, there's adequate rest, there's a decrease or a low level of inflammation. So if there's inflammation present, that's going to get in your way. I'll talk about that. So it's not just about protein. I'll tell you what you need. So the combination of peri-training protein, that's just like it sounds, right? Perimenopause is before you get there. Peri-training is before the training. So the combination of peri-training protein consumption with inadequate or ineffective resistance training protocols will not maximize improvements in strength or hypertrophy. So what that's saying is, pardon my French, if your resistance training program sucks, it's not enough stimulus for your muscle. It doesn't matter if we're talking about pre-protein consumption or post-exercise consumption, because there's nothing really to talk about. So the whole idea is having adequate protein before a challenging strength training workout. And let me tell you that challenging doesn't come when we're talking strength training from how long does it have to be. You don't need to go to an hour class or do an hour workout on your own. If you do 10 minutes, but it is high quality and you reach muscular fatigue, not overall, my body is tired, muscular fatigue, then you have enough stimulus to warrant post exercise protein that will help you rebuild and recover. Resistance exercise increases muscle protein synthesis, just doing it, for about 48 hours. Now, prior studies have said about 24 is ideal, but here's what we know. The muscle protein synthesis varies a little bit from the studies. And again, I said I have a good handful, about 7 of them included. Some of the studies varied a little bit. So ideally, the one I go with for you when I'm creating programs, talking to you about recommendations, is about an increase in that protein synthesis for about 24 hours. That's really where it peaks within that. 36 hours, it starts to dissipate. 48 hours, I really highly doubt that you or and I like to work hard. If I'm going to do it, it better be worth it. I doubt that either of us is working hard enough that we have a substantial increase for 48 hours. So I put that in the asterisk and also put 24 is my recommendation that we go with that. That is, the environment is ripe for about 24 hours for supporting your muscle protein synthesis, but it's only optimized with the ingestion of amino acids. The synergistic effect of taking resistance training, a high quality workout, plus amino acid ingestion or eating good high quality protein afterward provides the right opportunity to support muscle growth. And you do want lean muscle growth. Listen, muscle takes up less space than fat. So if you're thinking, I don't want to get bigger, I don't want to gain, I don't want to get growth, and you're getting stuck on that word, catch yourself, right? And I know it's just conditioning. I need you to know that, right? So for 30 or 40 years, if you've thought the smaller I am, the better I am, I mean, even saying that out loud, isn't it ironic? How awful. What a message to send to women instead of being loud and heard and stand up and be big in life. Have a big life. So go there, visit your mindset on that one. But here's what has to happen. We have to have resistance training. You have to reach muscular fatigue. It has to have adequate volume. And what I mean by that is, and be careful with this because there are a lot of studies coming out about women over 40, and I should say this, there are not a lot of studies coming out. There are a lot of trainers currently talking about studies coming out that intuit that women over 40 should have more volume. And that might mean training more days of the week or training more sets to fatigue or training more repetitions in each set and any of those. But what that negates, that research negates, is looking specifically at women in midlife is the need for the rest that has to happen. Because if you're training every day and you're not doing full body, you're missing the point as far as metabolism goes. If you're doing full body exercise with resistance training or exercising so hard, even if you do resistance training and then maybe you do some really hard hit that also causes a lot of muscle breakdown the following day, you still may not be allowing your body recovery. And that is unique to you. So make sure that you provide adequate rest days for repair between workouts. Related to lean muscle increases is more relative to local muscle fatigue than functional movement. Okay, so let me say that again. When we're talking lean muscle increase, which is what you want to boost your metabolism, it is more relative to local muscle fatigue, meaning that you fatigue in, say, your biceps. You fatigue in the chest muscles when you're doing that chest press. It is not that you're, say, doing, and nothing against a kettlebell swing if you can do them. Great way to get your heart rate up, great way to warm up, get some power in your legs. However, the transfer is kind of all over to the body. You'll incorporate your core. I still would love to see you do some squats and some lunges, some single leg deadlifts, fatigue specifically the muscle groups so that you gain the overload in that muscle. And functional movement alone, functional workouts alone will not do that. So I'm justifying the need here for both. Absolutely, we want to be functional people, being able to rotate, laterally flex, bend, and extend long into our 90s, if not into triple digits. But if you want a good body composition and bone density, so that you resist falls, and if you do fall, you don't fracture, you've got to be lifting heavy weights and you want to maintain that lean muscle tissue. And functional exercise alone won't do it. For women in menopause, estrogen decline causes a decline in muscle. Cortisol increase causes a breakdown in muscle. And I'm summarizing from earlier. Your lifestyle habits matter. If you've got poor quality of sleep, we got to work on that. If you're having excess caffeine, you got to work on that. And if you have a negative energy balance, you're not eating enough. You will not see progress. So it is true. There have been studies in probably most often and frequently published in the Obesity Journal and Postmenopause Journal, where women who are postmenopause and on a low calorie diet are given higher protein intake and it's distributed equally throughout the day, they will lose more weight and maintain more of the muscle mass. There's still a loss of muscle, but not as great as if it was low calorie and also just regular protein. Not necessarily low protein, but just, RDA standard, not elevated. And, that's something to consider. But here's the other piece. If you're a woman in postmenopause, chances are that if you want to optimize your weight loss results, in the end, you have to create more lean muscle tissue. You need more calories potentially than you're taking in. There may be a mindset, and this may be something far beyond coaching, and it may mean a little therapy to really revisit what are your thoughts about eating and calories and that kind of energy balance so that it is not negative. So we'll come back to that at the end, but there's also this. So we talk about protein, and I've talked a little bit about alkalinity and the need for vegetables, and this is all about show me the fat. So we rarely talk about fat when we're talking about protein needs and muscle and post exercise, but in older women, consuming a diet high in PUFA, okay, so getting adequate fatty acids, also supported reduced inflammatory response to exercise. The high fat, anti inflammatory diet enhances growth response for favorable skeletal muscle. So while the conversation is usually around protein, how much and when to consume it, whether it should be consumed with carbohydrates, you also want to consider if you're eating and also potentially taking in anti inflammatory fats via supplements, like omega 3 supplements, may help the overall effect. I've shared before, but I'll share this again. When I'm training, if I'm doing something, preparing for an Ironman or an event, I am bumping up my omega 3 daily intake by threefold because there is an increased rate of inflammation. And at midlife, upwards of that or anywhere between, say, 6 and 9 may be appropriate. So if you're not comfortable just doing that on your own, have a chat with your health coach and or your practitioner, your medical provider. Let's talk a little bit about fasting. I've touched on it earlier, but it's really important here. Resistance training in a fasted state does show an increased potential for muscle protein synthesis. But however, there are no studies on women in menopause currently. It's just too new, the study on fasting, and it's, of course, done with young males. But it's only when the training, resistance training in a fasted state, was combined with amino acids afterward that the muscle protein synthesis is actualized. So don't get too caught up in, oh, we tend to hear the first sentence of a study and think, I'm going to run with that. And we sometimes need that last sentence, right? Studies in young adult males show that 20 grams of protein enhanced their muscle protein synthesis, but that 40-gram post workout had no better effect. So there's a threshold for them. With older adults, it's an inverse relationship. With older adults, 20 grams of protein wasn't adequate. It wasn't enough and reached the threshold, but 40 grams had a far better effect. There's a minimum amount. Pre-exercise snack, you need to be aware of this. This came up in one of our with one of our member discussions very recently. A pre-exercise snack. So say before your workout, you're going to have a simple shake and you've got about 15 grams of protein in that. That does not negate your need for a post-exercise protein shake or meal. That requirement does not go away. So it's not math. You're not taking, okay, well, I got 15 there, so really I only need, another, 20, 25, and I'm good. No. The pre-exercise smoothie or shake or something with protein in it is optional for you, but the post is not. Between about 1 and 2 hours afterward, you need, and if you want to optimize your muscle, I'll say that. So those of you who need or want to optimize your muscle really want to take in that high protein meal of at least 30 grams, if not 40, if you can stomach that. There are 3 potential problematic protein foods that I want to mention that are often used in studies, and they are whey, egg, and soy. And whey I've talked about. The problem with that is it is a dairy food. Not only that, but it is a dairy food where, it's curds and whey, right? Little Miss Muffet. So the whey has been separated out. Whey is digested very quickly. And that can be problematic for women who already don't break down proteins very well. You would think it'd be great, but it's actually not so great. And if you ever have that protein sitting on your shelf, that whey protein is in there, and you're not working out today, but you're going to go and have a smoothie, you will spike your blood sugar because it's rapidly absorbed, and that spikes your insulin. And that means you're now storing fat until that insulin level comes down. Hours later, you've blown the opportunity to really burn fat by choosing your foods a little bit more carefully. Egg and soy both fall into the list that, as I take women through, say, the food flip to figure out what are their food sensitivities, and I take you through a blueprint. So this is test your body, test its reaction. And yeah, you may also want to do a lab test. I have done one recently. Actually, I'll be processing in a couple of weeks to see if removing certain trigger foods has actually helped and cleared your gut. Because listen, you can't have a good metabolism if your gut health is terrible, right? That's where you absorb everything and digest everything. So if it's not getting in, and you've got issues there, you're not going to get the results that you want. But egg and soy are on that list of food sensitivities. We recommend that you remove them for a short period of time, not to diet. We substitute other things where those things would go, and then you put them back. We test them one by one and see what your reaction to it is. And let me tell you, it's much more convincing when you do it like that than if somebody says, oh, don't eat that. And that's not the point. We actually don't want to eliminate forever any of those foods. We want to figure out why. Why can't I have that? What's not working about that? What do I need to fix in my gut? Because that's just a sign and a symptom. Something isn't correct or right with your gut health. So why not fix it so you can eat a wide, diverse range of foods? And some of those most likely to become food sensitivities are best rotated. It is those foods that are high sensitivity likely foods that we eat every single day that cause us the most trouble. They're the most likely to become problems for us. So if you can tolerate eggs, you'd have them a couple times a week, not every day. If you can tolerate dairy or some dairy, sometimes Greek yogurt and aged cheeses work a couple times a week, but not every day. That will work better for you. You may have experienced the opposite of an elimination phase of a diet during the holidays. I mean, you're right. You ever notice, those rich foods, the traditional ones, grandma's recipe, they're foods that you're not used to consuming. And, you try them and then you're kind of over it because you're miserable or bloated and don't feel really great afterward. That's the opposite, right? Of increasing the consumption or the frequency of the consumption of certain foods that don't work with you. So, whey, egg, and soy, they're on a short list of common food sensitivities that women in midlife don't tolerate. And yes, you and I more so because we have more hormones. Hormones in the gut are like best friends. And so we have more issues than men. So, whey is a common inflammatory contributor, not just for those with autoimmune disease, but for older adults and with an inability to break down proteins that are ingested as well as they once did. The best way to know, test your body by eliminating for a period of time and then reintroducing. Women who are seeking plant based sources of protein will experience a wall, really, of essential amino acids that is insufficient compared to animal protein. The addition of branch chain amino acids and that supplementing, in terms of pills, and that's not a lot of fun. I'll tell you that the way all of them are dosed is, you'll take 5 or 6 pills before or after a workout. Yeah. So it's not a great way to consume them. Or there are some powdered drinks that are awful. So if you found a good one, let me know about it. But all those that I've tasted, I just as soon take the pill. So you're looking for that BCAA, branched chain amino acid supplement that contains leucine, valine, and isoleucine. And that can support women who don't eat enough protein or are primarily eating your protein from plant-based sources. So as a solution, you may want to look at that. So what about carbohydrates, right? We've talked fat, but there's always been a conversation about this. In any mixed meal, so you're sitting down to literally have a meal or a smoothie, you're going to have some carbohydrates. You want some, but it doesn't require a lot to boost the effect of the protein for muscle protein synthesis. In fact, in the majority of studies, the additive effect of carbohydrate post exercise is not proven. There's not enough positive research to show that's supportive. The carbohydrate seems to stop the muscle breakdown by replacing glycogen in the muscle, but that's about it. So, looking at old time ratios, we used to say 1 to 3 or 1 to 4, meaning 1 part protein to 3 to 4 parts carb. I would no longer go with that, especially for women in midlife who are more sensitive to carbs and a blood sugar spike because of it. But you also do not want to go no carb or low carb. So include them wisely. Older adults have a blunting effect to low doses of essential amino acid consumption compared to young adults. I just want to make sure that you've got that. So here's the deal. It's been observed that the combined effects of resistance exercise and amino acid or protein ingestion on the enhancement of muscle protein synthesis may be delayed and or blunted in older adults, suggesting that nutrient sensitivities may be compromised with advancing nutrition. So it's important that you know this. There's a blunting effect. We need more protein, and those that we're not sensitive to, for instance, not necessarily whey or eggs or soy. And we also need to be a little bit more sensitive to the time and the timing. Between 1 to 2 hours is really ideal, especially if you normally have a high protein diet anyway. Here's the exception to the rule. I'll get to fasting. And if you are exercising, resistance training, fasted, what you should do differently. So, in general, eating protein on a per meal basis, at least 30 grams of high quality protein, and following a post exercise increased essential amino acid consumption, closer to about 40 grams, improved older adults' muscle protein synthesis so that it was comparable to young adults, like 20 somethings. The amino acid leucine is identified as the important trigger, but other essential amino acids are required to facilitate the synergistic response. It's like an orchestra. Therefore, you can't just take one pill. Like you're not just going looking for leucine. You're looking for all the branched chain amino acids. And you've got to eat a variety of foods and consume high quality proteins, potentially through branched chain amino acid supplements. In addition, might be warranted for you if you're not reaching adequate protein sufficiency. But here's the deal. If you're not eating adequate protein sufficiency, you have to ask, why not? Why am I not doing this for myself if I know I need it? It's always food first, a pill second. Just to give you an idea of how much an increased amount of protein in older adults works, the rate of post resistance training muscle protein synthesis was increased 91% compared to no post meal feeding. So listen up. If you're skipping a meal after exercise, you're eating a lettuce salad or having butternut squash soup and really not paying attention to protein. You're not eating at all, you're not eating enough, or you have the wrong thing, say an all fruit smoothie. Those are the three biggest mistakes you can make that sabotage that weight training that you're doing. If you're just beginning strength training, listen up. Protein intake is more, not less important for you. Multiple studies show that active older adults have enhanced muscle protein synthesis compared to inactive. Similarly, those starting an exercise resistance program are not yet fully benefiting from muscle protein synthesis, so you require more. And that's true when you're just starting out. So, for the first few months at least, more protein, not less. Before and after alone is not enough. So, just to think of bookending or following your workout with protein, it's total protein intake positively related to muscle and strength gains. That is an around the clock per meal dose of high quality protein, at least 30 grams per meal, even closer to 30 to 40 at breakfast and dinner, is most beneficial. Pair that with meals or smoothies post exercise if meal timing is not conducive to allowing the right timing of that 1 to 2 hours post exercise. And if your energy demands or your need for more caloric surplus is required. If you take one thing from this episode, many women wonder, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not gaining lean muscle mass? Why am I not seeing changes? And potentially, it's not the exercise. They're not eating breakfast. They're having soup or salad for lunch without adequate protein, fat, or resistant starches. They're not eating enough for dinner. You would not suspect that what would work for your teenage athletic son or daughter would work for you, right? As a midlife woman, you're far more likely to be losing muscle than gaining it. Your cortisol levels are high and energy deficit, though you've been told calories in, calories out is the way, will make your body burn fewer calories. So come back to this. So let's say you have a teenage son or daughter, and it may have been a while, maybe you never did. But if they were going to basketball practice for 2 hours in the morning before school and then doing a second practice after, and they were really barely eating. They came home, showered, went to school, skipped breakfast though. And they don't really like the school lunch and they weren't eating much there. And they come home and they kind of pick at dinner. maybe have a good meal there, you would not suspect that that should work for them. Why would you think that it should work for you when they have more optimal muscle protein synthesis than you do? So it's really kind of crazy if you're thinking you could get away with something that you know wouldn't be good for your adolescent children. So there are chances if you're chronically in a caloric deficit, that you don't have much energy, that you want a nap, that you reach for caffeine and then you use wine to wind down, you're more likely to be constipated and you probably can't lose weight even though you want to. Potentially, you're not eating enough. An active body requires calories to thrive and to create energy. You may choose to simply focus on thin, right? Even not even want to be active. But that too will backfire because as you lose significant enough muscle, you will either slow metabolism or become frail or both. There's thin, there's emaciated, and at some point as you age, you will cross that threshold. If you're dieting or otherwise restricting your calories as a result of fasting, you likely need additional protein over and above the recommendations here. So, in summary, consider the following to preserve lean muscle, your strength, and to optimize your body composition. Number one, adequate resistance training. Make sure you've got a workout that's designed for you. Number two, adequate protein, possibly pre and also post workout, but not totaling up those two. That post workout smoothie, 30 to 40 grams, or a meal also works. All day protein intake dosed on a per meal basis at about 30 grams at each of 3 meals. Increase your intake of polyunsaturated fatty acids and of omega 3s. So, my recommendations. Here's real terms for your real today. If you have fasted overnight before your morning exercise, eat a high protein meal immediately after to stop further muscle breakdown from combined cortisol high early in the day, your reduced estrogen levels, and resistance training. That's 3 strikes, you're out. So get that protein in quickly. Continue to follow a high protein meal schedule for 24 hours following the resistance training. Don't let down your guard. You have this window of opportunity. If you are in a fed state, even having had a simple shake of protein and just say unsweetened almond milk, for instance, before your workout, you still need the post workout full dose of protein. Timing it 1 to 2 hours post exercise enhances muscle protein synthesis the most. And last, if you are less active and just beginning, your protein needs are greater than a consistently active, resistance trained older adult. So the older you get, lastly, your protein needs do not decrease. In fact, they increase. There you have it. That was a lot. That was long. I think it's potentially longer than almost any podcast I've done, at least for the last 7 or 8 years. We've kept them a little shorter. So I hope you had a long hike and or you've listened to both parts in your commute to and from. And last, I want to leave you with this. If you have all your bases covered, you have the support you need, both in terms of the reminders for protein and you have a strength training program that you know was designed for you based on women just like you. And it's adequately taking you to muscular fatigue safely, then you're golden. But if you need support, Stronger is open right now. I'm releasing this podcast as a bonus on the very last day to get the early bird rate. Now, if you come later this month, you will still get a great rate. And you can get in through March 31st, all day that day. And we start April 1st. So imagine the 4th of July barbecue with more energy, more strength, more stamina, sleeveless arms, you name it. And I'll be there reminding you about having that post exercise smoothie or meal at the right time as well. What are you waiting for? Let's start flipping 50 today. If you have questions or comments, please leave them below the show notes at flipping50.com/post exercise protein.